I always hear people talking about how older music sounds better than the music that's coming out today, and a big part of that is because people tend to think that the best music ever was the music they listened to when they were teenagers, and nothing afterwards is ever as good. But not me. Of course not. And that's because I've spent the last 40 years of my life working in the music business, producing and mixing in multiple genres, which meant I've spent every day working on new music. I couldn't afford to live in the past. In fact, there's been times where I've not listened to my favorite songs from my past for years on end. But I've started working on my own music again, which has led me to go to listen to those songs again, and I realize older music does sound better. Now, you'd expect a guy like me to say that it's all because those songs were recorded on analog tape as opposed to how we do it today with digital recording. And while it is a factor in the sound of those records, it's only a small part of why older music and songs sound better. The answer is actually much deeper. Now, the period of time I'm talking about is from the mid to late 1950s, when recording technology had evolved to where it sounded really good, all the way through the 1970s and into much of the 80s, when the prosumer audio gear business started to push the growth of home recording studios. And yes, a lot of things changed in recording technology during that time, but it was still a very elite, expensive, professional business. And the fundamental things that made those records sound the way that they did remain mostly unchanged. Let me show you. During the early years of this time period, there weren't that many recording studios, and the music business was way smaller than it is today. No one was mass producing recording equipment, so people who had recording studios would literally have to design and build their own mixing consoles, mic preamps, compressors, equalizers, and they were buying their parts from electronic supply companies who were making industrial-grade stuff, the kind of components you would find in tanks and airplanes and factories. The people who were building and running these recording studios, they were highly skilled electronic engineers and inventors, like Rupert Neve, who was a member of the British Army's Royal Corps of Signals, providing battlefield communications during World War II. He also recorded Winston Churchill's speeches and built a PA system for Queen Elizabeth. Later, he built equalizers, mic preamplifiers, compressors, and of course his legendary Neve mixing consoles. William Dilley was an electrical engineer, inventor, combat pilot, and was the chief test engineer for the United States ICBMs, which is the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Systems. He also founded Spectrasonics, built mixing consoles, and created the legendary C610 and V610 comp limiters, which were revolutionary. Bill Putnam, who is sometimes called the father of modern recording, worked on aircraft directional systems for the military and developed technologies for military intelligence. He went on to work with Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Quincy Jones, Sarah Vaughan, Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, created the legendary 1176 compressor, and founded Uri and Universal Audio. And there were many others with similar backgrounds and accomplishments. Eventually, some of them and others went on to form companies that built mixing consoles and outboard gear that other studios could just go and buy. But it wasn't the same as going to Guitar Center and buying a mixer there. They were building to the same specs as if they were building for themselves. And they saw the recording studio as kind of a laboratory. In fact, the engineers at Abbey Road Studios, where the Beatles recorded, wore lab coats. They built studios with meticulously handcrafted equipment to document music, recorded in rooms that were designed by experts for specific audio qualities. And they did this with the same seriousness, detail, and overbuilt bulletproof construction as the kind of work they'd done in the past, the kind of work that people's lives depended on. Their mindset and motivation was to build things that would last a long time at the highest quality they could possibly achieve. Whereas today, it's about the race to market by focusing on efficiency and scale of production and using the cheapest components you can get away with to maximize profits and increase shareholder value so you can be bought by an audio conglomerate or a private equity firm, both of which care more about quarterly reports than audio quality. And that's why a lot of today's audio gear usually becomes unrepairable and obsolete in just a few years. While the gear these people made decades ago is still sought after, still in use, and more valuable than ever, and they still sound unique. I think the difference in the quality of the things that people make comes down to the motivation of the people who created them. But I also think that when you have a certain kind of mindset and you put a lot of energy into making anything, there's kind of a spirit in it. Like this SSL at Tree Sound in Atlanta, Georgia. It's the first 4000 series SSL ever made, and this Neve 8078 at Blackbird Studios in Nashville. Both are one-of-a-kind consoles that have had decades of music and love flowing through them. I could feel the mojo, and you gotta have mojo. Studio time was incredibly expensive, not to mention the cost of tape, an engineer, a mixer, and a producer, which meant that it was usually only record labels who could afford it, and they weren't going to invest that kind of money in an artist unless they were really, really good. But more so, the musicians had to be really good, because it wasn't just about the cost, but about the process itself. You see, today we have unlimited recording tracks, which not only allow you to individually manipulate the sound and spend unlimited time mixing them together, but you can also record each instrument one at a time and fix little sections when needed. It's called nonlinear recording, and most people today are constructing songs using virtual software instruments like snapping together Legos. But back then, recording was a lot more limited, requiring the whole band or orchestra to record together directly to 2 stereo tracks, or in some cases, 3 or 4 tracks. It was done live. There was no way to go and fix a single instrument or vocal part. This is Frank Sinatra recording the song "It Was a Very Good Year" in 1965 at Bill Putnam's United Western Recorders. As you can see, everyone is in the same room recording at the same time. There can be no mistakes, and it has to have great energy and emotion. From what I've read, this was a single take, no redos and no edits. And even later, when 8, 16, and 24-track tape recorders came into use, making it possible to do overdubs, recording extra parts at a later time, most songs were still recorded by a full band, all playing at the same time, and overdubs would be backing vocals, maybe some percussion, but the primary core of the song arrangement was usually recorded live. So you've got the best musicians being recorded on great gear by incredible engineers. Obviously, that's going to make a better sounding record. But it goes way deeper than that. If you've ever been in a room with a group of really good musicians playing together, you'll notice that they're all listening and responding to each other. Let's say that they're playing a song and the singer starts to sing more quietly. Well, they're going to start playing quietly too, which will change the sound of their instruments, but the guitarist might switch from playing with a pick to strumming with their fingers. The bassist from playing with their forefingers to playing with their thumb, and is a whole other sound. Drums sound very different based on how loud they're being hit, as well as where on the head you hit. And I've seen where people who are used to singing together at the same time, one of them might go a little sharp or a little flat, and the other singers will somehow balance or offset that. It's kind of hard to explain how they do it, but it happens instantly, instinctually. And what that means is that you've got a bunch of people in a room who are experts at their individual instrument interacting with other people who are also experts. And even if the band isn't made up of the best musicians around, they're experts at playing with each other. It actually makes me think of this band called Almost Kings that I worked with years ago. I would record them live all playing together, and they would occasionally make mistakes, or sometimes their timing would go up and down because they weren't necessarily the best band in the world, but they played like they were the best band in the world. The way they connected to each other as musicians made me think of a steamroller. They just rolled right over the mistakes. And all this creates a sound that you can't recreate any other way. And they're blending their parts as they go along, so the mix is kind of baked into the performance. But nowadays, you've got producers sitting alone in a room, programming all the instruments and creating songs by themselves. And some of them are great musicians and songwriters, but I can tell you from having mixed thousands of songs that I've never seen one of them ever change the tone of an instrument or a software instrument in different places of the song. Now, they might play a little bass or guitar in there, and that kind of helps a little bit, but mostly the emotion and sound of the song is like this all the way through. Which is why I think mixers have become more important and higher paid, because technology allows us to glue together all these different parts and mimic a real performance to a degree, but it's not the same. As I said before, most people think that the reason older records sound better is because they're recorded on analog tape. And I think there's just a bit of a romantic idea or memory about that, because unless you were recording on a really early tape machine or maybe a 2-inch 8-track, most of the music that you've heard that was recorded on analog tape was recorded on machines that were designed to be as transparent as possible. It was way more subtle of a sound than most people realize. However, there was a massive impact on the quality of music because it was recorded on analog tape machines, but it had nothing to do with the sound. Now, I did make a video about that, but I hate to repeat myself and it would take too long. However, I do think it should be addressed, and from a different perspective. I recently went to visit my friend Jason Kingsland, who is an engineer, producer, mixer, inventor, and co-founder of Garbage Ideas, who make the FK compressor that I'm always showing on my live streams, to get some footage for a future video. We started talking about what it was like recording bands on analog tape, and he said this.
The thing about that time period, just like the way you're doing the work, the process that's there, is that like you're gonna sit there and put a band on the floor and hit record. And you are paying so much fucking attention because everything actually really matters right now. Your need to be present in the room, through the roof, astronomically high, of all time, right? Because like level being up, stuff distorting, stuff being noisy is now permanent. There's no RX, there is no, I'll fix it later, I'll run it through something, I'll make an edit, we can comp that out. It's all right now. So everything becomes 50 times more meaningful. Also, there's no screen, there's no visual stimulation, it's you, artist, speakers. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think also for the band, because there is a somewhat unfortunate thing where I think that people do know you can be edited, you can be comped, you can be tweezed, you can put a sample in it, you can do all this stuff. It literally just changes the outcome. Like, you know, the theory that observing the experiment changes the experiment.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That's it. You put people on tape and there is a certain thing of being like, I gotta do it. That to me is tangible, that's real. And I've seen that time and time again when you're putting people on tape and there is just like this layer of like, everyone's like, oh shit, we're doing the real game today.
Yeah.
And it forces people to do this amazing thing via performance. You just have to play the music in a way that's endearing.
Older music had way better singers because there wasn't a way to tune and fix every single word, so they had to be good. And those singers know how to do things like starting a little bit flat and bending to being right on pitch in a very powerful and emotional way. But what I'm focusing on right now is group vocals, the kind of stacked vocals you'd have in a chorus. And when I do that, I prefer to do it in a very old school sort of way. This is a song I've been working on with Sky Keaton, and he wrote this really cool refrain for the end of the song. Now, none of these vocals are tuned. Check it out. Little sharp, little sharp. Here's mine. Ooh. Oh, that's definitely sharp there. But you know, we're going for the vibe. And you know, when you put all that kind of singing together, you end up with something like this. A very wide, chorused, rich sounding vocal that is, you know, very old school. That's how they did it. People didn't tune everything. Now, the way people do it today is more like this. They'll tune every individual vocal. Now, yeah, I slightly exaggerated the auto-tune, but not by much. This is kind of what I get when I'm mixing songs for people. Here's my vocal. It's like a robot. So the end result is like this, going from the untuned vocals all together. Now to where everything's tuned. Very monophonic, you know, and also I did use a vocal align plugin on this second part here. We actually were pretty tight. I like the feel of it, but I threw it on there because a lot of people think tighter is better. Listen to it with the music. It almost gets more mono. It's not as wide because there's less variation between the left and right because everything's so tuned. You don't get this. It's just everything kind of comes towards the center. It's just not as big. Here's Here's it untuned. Full, rich, wide. And then to the tuned. And then guys will hear that sort of thing, and what they'll end up doing is going like, oh, it's not wide enough, it's not full enough after they've tuned it, so what do? They do this. They'll add a chorus plug into the channel where all the vocals are coming in together, and they'll do that because they're missing the modulation. It's this wavering kind of sound that naturally happens when untuned vocals are either sliding into or out of a note at different speeds, or when two vocals which are not perfectly in tune together are both slightly shifting their pitches at different speeds. Vibrato. So you might try the Valhalla Space Modulator. It's cool. Or you might try the Baby Audio Magic Switch, which actually is a cool chorusing plugin. Or you might even try the built-in Ableton chorus. All those are cool, but the problem is they're all modulating all 8 vocal parts at the same time. They all go up and down together, which is actually making all the parts sound more similar, as opposed to untuned vocals, where each track is at a different arc in the sound of human singing, which naturally fluctuates. So instead of this, all the vocals kind of moving in different ways and all that, you get this, where everything sounds the same and it just makes it sound smaller. And the same thing applies to instruments on these older records. Guitars, basses, keyboards, even early synths, none of them were 100% perfect. In fact, it's impossible to get a guitar perfectly in tune all the way across the neck, except for true temperament guitars, which are a newer invention. But basically, any non-digital instrument is going to be somewhat inaccurate. And back then, everybody didn't have their own personal tuner. There would usually be a strobe tuner in a recording studio, or everyone would tune by ear to a piano, a tuning fork, or something like this. The best example I can give you quickly right now are these acoustic guitars from a song called I Remember You by Rehab. They were played by Josh Cobb, who also played the drums. Nice sounding, right? Let me solo them up. Sound cool, right? But if I just listen to one of them, you can hear a couple notes being a little out of tune. It's obviously not perfectly in tune. Here's the other one. But together, sounds pretty goddamn good, right? Sounds like there's a chorus effect on it, but there's no effects. It's just the guitar being played twice. There's a reason why people like the sound of acoustic guitars, especially when they're doubled. Most of today's music is perfectly in tune. Every vocal, bass, keyboard, guitar, whatever instrument are all playing smack dab in the middle of each note. They're all on top of each other. And there's all this space in between. But everything wasn't perfectly in tune in older music. Everything was more spread out. Less space between the notes and a bigger sound. And all of this applies to timing as well. Today, most music is quantized, meaning that every instrument is programmed or edited to be perfectly on beat, on grid. And they even do this to live instrumentation. But since everything is hitting at the same time, it means that every impact is literally thinner. And people do this because that's what they see everybody else do. And most videos about music production focus on how to use software to achieve musical perfection. But I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when working on music today is worrying too much about perfection and not thinking about feeling or emotion. Now, I don't have any old school multi-track recordings that I can play as an example, but I do have a song I've been working on that shows some of what I'm talking about. On this song, you heard this track earlier when we were talking about tuning, I was definitely focusing on the feel. Here is the triangle part that I played. And as you can see, if you look at the grid right here, I'm definitely not playing on the grid. I'm playing around it. But I'm not worried about playing on beat as much as I'm just trying to get the right kind of feel. I also added a kalimba part. And I added a second one, which was actually really hard to do because I don't normally play these. And you can hear it flamming a little bit, but that's fine. I don't want them together. It makes them sound wider. I added this bass part. Definitely is not on beat like you can see on some of the grid here. It's kind of a bit all over the place. What's interesting on this one is actually rushing a little bit. Then I added this guitar part, which is definitely all over the place, but I was in a vibe. I know it sounds a little crazy, but it's gonna work. Then I put bass on. And I like it when bass is slightly behind the drums. You can see right here, I'm definitely behind the grid quite a bit. Then I add these guitar parts. Then we did hand claps. We did these live. These are not sampled parts. These are actually performed by all of us. And you can see they're all different. They're not repeating. Put it all together. And just to quickly show you the difference between quantized and unquantized drums, this is another song from the Rehab album that's coming out later this year that I worked on. And what you're going to hear is live drums playing with programmed drums that were done in a very old school way, so things aren't exactly on beat. It's kind of like older bands that would have two drummers and a percussionist, and they, of course, weren't quantizing everything. It just had a different kind of sound. Here they are unquantized. Quantized. Unquantized. Here you can just hear the flamming, and it's like this fatter drum sound. Quantized. Just kind of sits there, right? And then back to unquantized. Way groovier, way more vibey. Back when I was in high school and I would tell people that my life's goal was to do music, they would respond something like, "Ooh," and they'd look at me as if I just announced that I was going to be a prostitute. And even though my parents were very supportive, they were very concerned, and they certainly went out there bragging to their friends about it. People who were doing music were seen as outcasts and troublemakers, and I like that because that's how I felt. And there were a lot of obstacles to having a musical career back then, mostly the cost and limited avenues that were available to you for promoting and distributing your music. And what that meant was that anybody who was still doing music after high school was probably a lifer. The dedication to their craft as a singer, a musician, a producer, a mixer was very, very deep. And everybody was really damn good compared to now. And their focus was on the music. And so is the industry, at least compared to today. Even though record contracts were extremely unfair and record labels wielded immense power, there were still talent scouts. Sometimes artists would get signed just based on having good music. And they did do artist development, sometimes not expecting to have a breakout hit to the second or third album. Crazy, right? But today, a record label is not going to sign you unless you've got tens of thousands of Instagram followers or YouTube subs, no matter how good your music is. And there is no artist development anymore. As far as today's artists are concerned, I've sat in sessions with young engineers and watched how they work. An artist will come in and he'll have an instrumental that he either downloaded online or got from a producer. And it's usually an MP3, which is a lower quality compressed audio format. The engineer will drop that into whatever DAW that he's using and start to record the artist, who will either be singing or rapping straight through autotune. They're going through it while they're recording. And they typically don't have anything written in advance. They'll sit there and they'll just kind of say whatever comes to mind until they find two words that go together well. And they'll record that. And then they'll try to find two more words to record. I mean, they are literally recording songs, one or two words at a time, and just kind of whatever, man. But speed is the main thing. And they will mix that song right after the session and put it out that night or the next day, because consistent content is more important than quality music. And the sound, well, most of these engineers are using templates to mix the song. A template is this preset mixing setup with too many plugins and all this bizarre routing. I get some of these through my studio sometimes, and it's like these people have no idea how to mix music, but they use the same template on all the songs. So it's the same process crap over and over again. Now, not every artist is doing it just like that, but social media recognition is the focus. They're trying to get into the algorithm more so than getting into a deeper understanding and feeling of music. It's a completely different motivation, and that, to me, is the main reason why older music sounds and feels better. There are some other things I was going to talk about, like stereo width and panning, tempo changes in songs, sound palettes, lifestyle and listening environments, but this video is already way too long. And I did want to say that I don't hate technology. I use it all the time, and I'm usually the first amongst my peers to try new things. And I know that there is good music out there being made today. We just don't usually hear about it. If you think there's anything that I missed, or you have a disagreement about something, or there's some new music that you think I should listen to, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and always be unique.